This video is on what I call biology, which is the physiological foundation for happiness. And it's last, but certainly not least. And it's this idea that, we kind of have like physical energy as almost the foundation. Okay, so think about this. Let's imagine that you have an amazing family life with a ton of love. You have all these great friendships, and you're in your church or your meditation group or your community. You coach the baseball team, right? So you got all this social love in your life. Psychologically, you're like a expert meditator. You're super positive and just upbeat. And when bad things happen, you like know how to handle it. And finally, you had this crazy like travel delay. And so you haven't really eaten a meal in like 24 hours. You're running on like 2 hours of sleep. You've barely had any water to drink. And you've just been like sitting stuck in an airport all day. How happy are you going to feel in that moment? And so it's important to understand that this kind of like biological dimension of happiness is just as important as all the other ones. And so my intention in this video is to just run through some high level kind of big picture priority areas and give you some really practical steps in each one, knowing that you have these wonderful additional resources like these TED Talks I'll highlight down below, where you can go deeper into the kind of science and application of each of these ones, right? The core pillars being exercise, number one, number two, sleep, and number three, nutrition. And there's some maybe subcategories in each of those, like light and dark, which I'll talk about, and like temperature exposure and, basic like immune health stuff, right? But generally those are like the three pillars for your biological foundation. And again, I use that term foundation because like I use that airport example. Like if you are in a state where you're not exercising or you are not able to eat enough or in the right quality of food, and certainly if you aren't sleeping, it's going to be hard to almost have the physiological environment conducive to states of positive emotion and happiness. Okay, so getting the physical side right is kind of our core foundation. And I remember even hearing an interview with Tal Ben-Shahar, who's kind of a pioneer in the field of happiness studies, says if I was a therapist, the first question I would ask people, the first question is not some complex thing about your childhood and your mom or dad or what medications are you taking. It's like literally the first thing is just, are you exercising? As human beings, we are meant to move. And so if you're not exercising, it's not even about making you happier. You're literally not even at like baseline level for mood and emotion. Okay, so we're just trying to get you at baseline right there, right? Next, sleep. So disordered sleep is associated with all sorts of adverse mental and physical health outcomes, everything from increased risk of heart attack to diabetes. But I think really interesting, the mental side too. I learned this from neuroscientist Andrew Huberman. I didn't know him personally. I heard him talk about it for the record. He's pretty famous. But he talks about how when you look at people who like commit suicide, oftentimes you can look back in a period of several weeks, you see like disordered sleep patterns. And so even just 1 or 2 nights of poor sleep, you can see things like your grip strength and your jump height are diminished. Your ability to think logically and remember things and solve problems are diminished. And of course, over time, all sorts of health issues there. So sleep is the second core pillar of this. And then 3 is nutrition. Right? Just making sure you're eating enough, but also not too much. This is sometimes called energy toxicity. It is kind of the number one public health crisis in America right now is obesity. And it's energy toxicity because just like it sounds, if you overfill your car with oil and gas, it's going to be a problem. If you overfill your body with more fuel than it uses and you store body fat to an excess, again, leads to all sorts of health issues, which impact not only your body, but also your mind. There's a really interesting thread on this from Dr. Chris Palmer. You can look him up from Harvard if you're interested. He has a book called Brain Energy, but he talks about how your brain is like not separate from your body, right? Metabolism is the process of how your body, including your brain, uses energy to function. And he makes the case that all mental disorders are actually all metabolic disorders. And so The body and mind are very intimately connected. And so nutrition here, right? But also the other two areas of how you process calories and food, right, has implications for your overall mental and physical health. Okay. So these are the three pillars. Like I said, down below, you can have some of the best TED Talks to highlight kind of like a master class in each of those areas: exercise, sleep, and nutrition. But in this video, I wanted to just break down some very practical, like what are the best practices here? And maybe even like you can think of this like the minimum effective dose. Okay, so that's a term from the medical field that's like, imagine this. So let's say you take literally, so you have a headache and you want to take some ibuprofen. And so you literally carve out, I'm trying to look if there's just like a piece of dust or something on my desk. Like, I don't know if you can see that little white speck. Okay. Imagine you take that's your ibuprofen, and you say, oh, my headache hasn't really changed. Now, at the same time, if you take a whole bottle, you're going to have to go to the emergency room and get your stomach pumped. And so it's this idea that there's like a minimum effective dose that if you just take, 100 milligrams, one of those little pills, right? That's probably enough, and you don't really want to take less or more. And so I'm going to try to share with you some like core practices here in the biological dimension of happiness, and I'll tell you why I share each one. So these are kind of in order of priority, I guess, but not necessarily. First one, sleep. Best practice here: consistent 7 to 9 hours of sleep in a dark room. Now, why do I highlight that? I'll share in a second, okay? Consistent 7 to 9 hours. Okay, that is like pretty universal. Surgeon Generals, World Health Organization, top sleep scientists, they're going to say you want to get like 7 to 9 hours per night of sleep. But interestingly, light and dark play a role here. So when you get sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning, that's going to help to regulate your circadian rhythms. These are the natural kind of ebbs and flows throughout the day that regulate both sleepiness and wakefulness. And so that's going to help to set your kind of biological clock and get you feeling better early in the day. And same thing, there was a study published, actually I think just a couple years ago. If you search around for like study on darkness and mental health, basically they found that if you're exposed to light, particularly blue light, between the hours of, I don't remember exactly, but let's say it was like 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., it significantly increased your risk of other mental disorders. So what does that mean? Getting up in the middle of the night and being on your phone, right? Or even sleeping. A less extreme example would be sleeping in a room where it's just not very dark. Okay, so what we're aiming here is sunlight in the morning and some bright light during the day, a cool, dark room at night, 7 to 9 hours. And you can even watch this. This is kind of unscripted, by the way, but I really love this. So I sleep with this every night, even when I'm just at my house. It was like $10. And earplugs. I do not use these every night because it's pretty quiet where I live, but I always travel with them. So that will help you to optimize your sleep. Now, a couple other things around sleep. Sleep scientist Dr. Matthew Walker talks about QQRT: quantity, quality, regularity, and timing. Okay, those are the pillars of sleep health. And so that's one of the reasons I emphasize a consistent schedule in a dark room, right? It's hitting on all of those things. So quantity and quality. Cool room, it's dark. Okay, that's going to help you get good quality sleep. If you have sleep apnea, listen to me, which you snore and it wakes you up. Some of my like best friends, my dad have it, and I'm on their case all the time. Like, quit being so proud. Just get a sleep study, get a CPAP machine, or get one of those mouth devices or nasal tape. Like, do something to fix it, because it is going to just destroy your well-being if you don't. Okay, so quality. Quantity, we talked 7 to 9 hours. Regularity. Well, it turns out consistency in your sleep schedule is important for sleep hygiene as well. So you want to aim within reason to try to go, to bed and wake up roughly in that same maybe 1 hour to 30-minute range. And then finally, timing. So this is a really interesting and often overlooked point that we all have natural set points. Some people on the one extreme would be kind of an early bird, and they naturally wake up at like 5 o'clock and they feel ready to go. Another person on the later end might wake up at like 9:30 and feel ready to go. Probably the majority of people fall roughly around 7 a.m. So you're going to bed at 11, getting up at 7. It's kind of your natural rhythm. So again, to the extent possible, maybe aligning with your sort of genetic set point. Okay, so that's kind of the foundation right there for sleep. Next, 60 ounces of water. Conveniently, I need a sip of water. Easy way to do this. One of these usual cups like kind of standard, nothing fancy, is 15 ounces. And so I try to drink 4 of those throughout the day, maybe a little bit extra. And you don't need to go crazy here. I'm not the type that drinks a gallon of water, so I'm just peeing all day. But it is important to maintain hydration for cell function and just overall well-being. A lot of people are kind of slightly dehydrated, and it just makes you feel a bit lousy. So this one, I think, again, very important. I'm going to make a sort of a general guideline here, and I'll explain why. Let's say 2.5 hours of exercise. But what are you doing in that period? Well, I'm going to give you maybe 3 invitations. Break a sweat by getting your heart rate up. Move or lift some heavy objects. And once in a while, maybe every week, every 2 weeks, really push yourself with a sprint. And now why do I make that kind of baseline recommendation? Well, there's various inputs here, but folks like Dr. Peter Attia, leading world expert on longevity and performance, folks like Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist who does a lot in terms of sharing science-based resources with people, but even more broadly, like literally like the CDC, right, the World Health Organization, Surgeon General, all of these folks typically recommend each week roughly 2.5 to 2 hours, something in that range of cardiovascular exercise, right? And so that's what I said about get your heart rate up and break a sweat. You don't have to push that hard. Zone 2 cardio would be kind of you're starting to break a sweat. You can still have a conversation, but you're going to be kind of struggling a little bit and you're breathing heavy, okay? So that's one piece. I also say to lift or move heavy things, okay? Not that you have to be a bodybuilder or a power lifter, but this is going to be really important, especially as you age. The body tends to lose muscle every single year once you get beyond, I think the number's like 35 or 40. And so just improving your musculature, that's going to help with your stability, in some cases even maybe your bone density. And so that resistance-based training, not just cardio, that's another kind of core pillar to be well-rounded in terms of your kind of physical health, right? Is to develop some basic capacity for strength. And then I say sprint once in a while. Okay, so again, maybe once a week, maybe every couple weeks. This is something called your VO2 max, which is your maximal aerobic capacity. So an example of the workout I do, it's on the more intense end of the spectrum, but once a week I do what's called a Swedish 4x4, and it is not pleasant. Thank you, Sweden. But I basically do 4 minutes at my max heart rate all out, 4 minutes rest, and repeat that cycle 4 times in interval. So your max heart rate, like 90% max heart rate, for me, that's about 175 beats per minute. Okay, you can calculate that based on your age. You want to be going that 90%-ish range. It's rough, okay? So do what you can, but once in a while, right? Very few adults actually like sprint and just go all out in their routine. So within, health reasons, try to touch that upper extreme so you're building your aerobic capacity, because that is highly predictive of your longevity and your health span. So not only how good you're feeling, but how long you live, right? Because it is hard to be happy if you're dead. So that's why I come up with that roughly 2.5. Okay, so it's not total exact science here. We're just trying to get you started and get the minimum. Would be like, okay, let's say 30 minutes, 5 days a week. So a half hour times 5, that's going to get you 2.5 hours. And so maybe like 3 of those days, for 30 minutes, you break a sweat, you go for a jog, you get on the treadmill, get your heart rate up. And 2 of those days, you lift heavy things. So you try to work your whole body, you do a few exercises, and yeah, once in a while, you throw in a sprint, okay? So that's, again, I'm just trying to like keep a simple checklist here, not my fully like optimized plan that I do, okay? So aim for that as your minimum. And then the final one, nutrition. Eat real food. Like, so obvious, but like, we just don't do it. Like, literally think about just like if you were out in the woods, what you see like a Snickers bar laying on the ground or like a Dorito tree, like all of these things that we're eating so often, right? A good rule, if it doesn't have a face or it doesn't grow, don't eat it. If it doesn't have a face or doesn't grow, don't eat it. Because what would that mean? Whether it's an animal, like a living thing, or it grows out of the ground. Everything else is not food, right? It's something that we invented. And so I sometimes remember this as eat 1 ingredient foods, right? Which means if you pick up a protein bar from the store even, which I'm guilty pleasure. Sometimes I do like one of those ridiculous, cookies and cream, chocolate pie protein bars. Okay, so not perfect, but right? All those things in there, cellular modified dextrose, sodium bicarbonate, like soy lectin extract, right? It's like those are just chemicals, right? Now you pick up a bag of rice, the ingredients are rice. You get a whole rotisserie chicken, the ingredients are chicken, right? That's what I mean by one ingredient foods, right? Just eating real foods. If you just focus on eating whole, real foods and limiting the highly processed, highly addictive, often kind of toxic when we look at the chemicals that are in there, particularly in the US that are like banned in Europe, okay? That's going to go a long way just feeling better, because especially if you're eating like high sugar, high processed food, here's what happens. And you can probably relate to this experience. You get like this peak and surge of dopamine and feeling good and like sugar rush, and then you crash, right? And then you need another piece of candy or another granola bar. And just all day, you're kind of on that cycle. If you're eating foods high in protein, high in fiber, right? It's kind of, instead of up and down, it's like a slow or steady burn, okay? So just to start, right, eat real food. Aim for one ingredient foods. And if you want a little bit more guidelines, here's a couple things to consider. Try to get a big serving of fiber in every meal. Okay, so in the morning, with whatever you're going to eat, maybe you throw in a large Honeycrisp apple or some berries. With your lunch, maybe you throw in a side salad or a big salad. And then with dinner, maybe you heat up a bag of frozen vegetables or you grill some fresh vegetables. Okay, just add fiber wherever you can. There has never been a study I've seen that associated increased fiber intake with anything negative. Like, it's just so good for you. And it's going to help you to feel more full so you don't overeat on junk food. And then the second is you may want to increase your protein intake, especially if you're a woman watching this. Women tend to be pretty undernourished oftentimes when it comes to protein, but same with the general public. I think a pretty reasonably conservative recommendation, you'll hear up to 1 gram per pound of body weight, especially if you're a highly trained athlete or you lift weights or you train a lot. But I'd say aiming for even half that, or maybe 80% of that, is going to get you in a pretty good spot. So I'm about 180 pounds. And so if I'm getting, let's say, 90 grams is probably the bare minimum. And, I might aim for more like 150 grams, right? That's still a lot of protein, 50 grams per meal. But protein also is going to help you to feel full, and it helps you to rebuild your muscles as you start to train, okay? So you don't need to be a bodybuilder, but there's some final guidance there. Okay, if it doesn't have a face or it doesn't grow, don't eat it. Eat one ingredient foods, and do what you can to prioritize in every meal a large serving of protein and a large serving of fiber, and just watch how different you feel. Okay, so I just wanted to, like I said, you can go deeper if you want down below, but just give you some very practical do this checklist best practices to optimize your biology, kind of the physiological dimension of happiness and health. You're going to get consistent 7 to 9 hours of sleep in a cold, dark room on a consistent schedule, 60 ounces or more of water, 2.5 hours a week, half hour a day, 5 days a week. Get in the gym, break a sweat, get your heart rate up, move some heavy things, push yourself once in a while, and eat real food. Okay, so thank you for watching.